It is time for the last hurrah of the LD test bench to do its very last review, where I'm going to be looking at this very promising brand new cooler from Gamdias. Good afternoon and welcome to Turbo Tortoise Tech. I've already done the baseline test and everything with the LD Hyper 212, that being the baseline cooler that I would suggest you would have for 6 and 8 core processors. It does a very good job up to about 140 watt TDP. So it can actually even do some of the higher end AMDs and actually will run pretty well. I mean, those come with their stock cooler, the Wraith Prism, which is much smaller and stuff than this. So this has been a really good baseline test, and it's going to continue to be our baseline for testing because they're about 600-700 Rand now for this 212 Black Edition that comes with the RGB fan and the rest of it. So the price versus performance is exceptionally good, but sometimes you don't really want to hear fan curve when you render or do anything outside of that where you need some exceptional sort of cooling performance so that you can keep your fan curve lower. Enter water cooling. So I've done a number of water cooling stuff, and I actually use a 280R right now until today. About 18 months ago I got it. I'll check the exact dates for you, but it's been a really long time that I've had that cooler. And the only thing from that first generation were the fans that were a little bit concerning. So when I saw this with a completely new fan setup and stuff, I was very interested in testing it because that really was the Achilles heel of these kits. They've also done a new infinity mirror head on the pump, so I think that's going to look quite nice after install. The white edition is the only one that's come through now of the new M3, so this has been the only one that I can then test for you. But without further ado, without further gilding of the lily, I'm going to actually do like a little live unboxing, as it were, so that we can sort of get the experience simultaneously the first time together. So opening up the box, they have changed their format and their layout a little bit to this eggshell style, which I actually prefer because there we go, box basically done with. And then inside you have your radiator. Well, let's start off with the fans, because this is like, oh, these are so much nicer. The mounting on these is like way superior. I will get a close-up of this and with the old fans so you can see, but nice rubberizing on them. The actual fan itself, the shaft play on the bearing is like way better than it was before. It doesn't move in and out so much, so depending on the orientation, it can then obviously move a little bit. So this is going to be a bit better for top mounting than the last set was. I've noticed the top mount on the old Gamdias wasn't the greatest because of that. So that was my primary thing, was, is this going to be better? And it's way better. The mount, everything, like far superior. The frame and everything feels way better than it did before. So big ups for them doing that. And 2 of those obviously, and they've also daisy chained the RGB, as I can see over here now, and then I'm sure there will be a daisy chain for the 4-pin connectors on the fans as well. Moving on into the rest of the kit though, they've included what looks like an RGB controller, like a separate one, in a different style. Normally they would give you the whole hub and dock and all the rest of it, but this is just a straightforward connect to SATA power, and then you'll be able to control your RGB from there. So we'll be able to test that on the test bench now as well, so we can see how that all works, which is quite nice. Then they've obviously got an adapter here for the Gigabyte stuff, because Gigabyte had to be difficult to make their own RGB header. Thanks, Gigabyte. Then in this bag is all the mounting bits and pieces with all those screws and everything we need to mount the pump head, and they've gone for a plate mounted system. I'm not sure if it's going to work like that on AMD. The last time, or on Intel, it will use the backplate. Actually, I'm pretty sure it's going to use the backplate. For AMD, they normally just screw into the existing backplate. So the backplate that's already there, that has the clips on top and bottom, normally they do screw into that. So I'll double check that in the manual, but it looks like it's the exact same system they used before, and nothing wrong with it. It was already pretty good, I have to say. Much better than some of the other premium brands that use the clip on top and bottom, and then the pump head doesn't like sit properly if you're not very careful and stuff. This is way easier to work with. Aha, here's that daisy chain I was talking about. So the fans will daisy chain into one connector, and then we have the pump itself. And now the pump as well has its own RGB out, and it has its own 4-pin connector, which I would assume they probably want you to connect directly to the board into AIO header. What you could do with that as well is, if you use an adapter to a SATA connector, then that will get full power all the time. You don't really want the pump to lose its power, because yeah, your PC sometimes won't boot because it'll just overheat because there's no flow of water because it's all sitting there. The pump head as well is a bit bigger than it was before, I have to say. The finish on it, not the greatest. I can see a little bit of a paint smear and stuff from the factory, a little bit of drip from that. Not the worst ever, but could have been done a little bit neater. The new infinity mirror though does look quite nice. I'm not going to peel the stick off until I've got it installed, just so I don't scratch it and mess it up before we get it on film, right? But it does look quite nice. And then the radiator tubes are Teflon coated again. They do look pretty well sealed. The shrink wrap and everything is about 10 mils over the connection point, so on both sides, so it's more than comprehensive enough for that. Similarly up top, I don't see anything that's going to cause a leak there. It looks like it's been well sealed and pressurized. And then we've got our 240 by 27 mil thick radiator, default size, nothing too out of the norm there. So if you have an existing one and you're looking at a white setup, it is very clean looking. I have to say, the pump face and everything, it does have quite a nice clean finish. Paint and everything on this was executed a lot better. We'll see after some screws and stuff go in it if it chips and flakes after that. But without further ado, without further gilding of the lily, I think it's time I slap it onto this motherboard.
Day 2.
And there we have it. Built Chione M3 white edition on the thing with the RGB fans and the stuff. So yes, basically, as I surmised though, those fans much better. The mounting brackets and everything are identical to what they were before, which is very good because they are, well, very good. They have also included, I do have the spare set over here, TR4 bracket as well, which is quite interesting. And they are torque mounted screws, so they are little springs in here to get that mounting pressure correct for that. It does, however, have a warning that this is not for 200 watt systems, which is pretty fair, or 200 watt, more than 200 watt CPUs, which is pretty fair. This is a 140 watt test, and it handled it, well, pretty damn well, all things considered. We'll get into it in a moment. But can I just say how nice that new infinity mirror looking pump is. The pump as well, the audio and stuff is about the same. I don't think they've actually changed anything there, just based on the performance results, well, which I'm going to show you now. You'll see what I'm sort of talking about. So at 100% fan on the Hyper 2 and 2 and 100% fan on this unit, they were sort of similar noise profile wise. The Hyper 2 and 2 gets to mid to high 60s on the decibel meter. This was on the north side of 70, and that's probably because there's two fans. It does peak out just under 3000 RPM. That's where its sort of maximum point is. I'd say between 2.5 and 3000, varying depending on, well, how much sort of power and stuff is going through the fan. The fan speed is never exactly perfect, so it does vary in that range. But well, before we get to the but, you can see the performance results are absolutely outstanding with 100% fan. Comparative to the Hyper 2 and 2, it's more than 10% better, sometimes 15 or 20% better, depending on the core that we're looking at. So it's done its job. It's done its job exceptionally well, where 100% is concerned with 100%. Then I started fiddling with different fan levels, and I found that 75 really gave the best sort of noise versus performance, and you wouldn't really benefit going too much higher than that, maybe a degree or two, and the noise profile is massively different between the two. But at 50% on these fans, at a solid 50%, the performance was not shifted so far back that I thought it became irrelevant, and that's what it's on right now. And you will struggle to hear it, especially if it isn't a case. It's going to muffle some of that audio for you. So I think noise profile wise, and doing a little bit more standardized testing with the decibel meter is definitely going to be the way to do things with this test bench in the future. Definitely going to look at that, use that a little bit more for that. But this base kit is way nicer than the first editions, just because of those fan upgrades. The pump is still doing basically the exact same job it was always doing. The reason that we're concerned about the pump is that these closed loops, or any loop, actually has a thermal efficiency point, and that's going to be dictated on how many radiators and how strong your pump is and how often that water is going to be flowing over those fins for the fans to cool them down. And so that, like the EK new DRGB and the EK Elites are extremely good because they have an extremely good pump. They've put in a budget version of their D5, which is quite premium as well in price. This is nothing like that. It's like less than half of what those cost, which gives it like a lot more like legs. I still think that their comparison versus the NZXXXX thing that they, naming but not naming, that's a bit wistful thinking. I think the finishing stuff is fine. The shrink wrap, everything, I'm pretty happy with. It could be a little bit better over here where it's on the actual Teflon, but you can always touch that up yourself. It's nothing, and well, you can see the silicone seals and all of that sort of stuff there, so it looks fine and it's sealed well enough. These Teflon covered tubes that are a little bit harder to bend and get this thing into shape. I actually struggled with that a little bit, and I will say that the air present in this does mean that it is going to be better as a top mount, or if you do front mount, just make sure that the inlets are higher than your pump point. So if your pump's sitting over there, make sure that those inlet points are above it, and then you should avoid some of those nasty bubbles and stuff. It does tend to be a thing with the Gamdias coolers, even my one, but my performance is basically exactly the same as day one, 2 years on, and that's double its warranty. So it's sort of done its job there in more ways than one. Obviously, putting on better fans is going to help. These are really good, I have to say. Like you can see with the temperature variance, even with doubling the RPM, it didn't increase so much in performance that it was like, okay, there's clearly a rubbish pump over here. The pump and everything is doing its job. And that's really what you want, because these fans, I'd say max 2 years, you're going to look at and you're probably going to need to replace them. But if your pump's still going, then you don't have to replace that whole kit. So new fans are like $250 a fan. The water cooling kit is $1,600. So I think that makes quite an easy sort of checkbox for that cost of ownership. It's nice that they've also done it in white. It's pity that the white from the fans doesn't quite match up to the white paint. They haven't color matched that too well, and it is a little bit nitpicky, but hey, some people might want to know about that. Alrighty, so this is where I do the conclusion and introduce like a new rating system that I'm going to be doing. So starting from the top, build quality, I'd give it a 7 out of 10. Value, easy 10 out of 10. It's in this price range. There's not really too much competitive with it, at the price range. That's one of the big things with Gamdias. The look and feel, I'd give it a solid 9 out of 10. The new pump and mirror and everything is way better than I was expecting it to look. And for performance, I once again got to give it a solid 8 out of 10, which gives it probably about a 7 point something out of 10, or 8 point something out of 10. It is pretty solid. There are a few things I'd like them to fix up. The only thing that's like out of the box that was a little bit like, come on, was the paint smearing on the pump. Everything else was painted and powder coated and stuff really nicely. Just that you guys kind of let it smear because you're obviously not baking or whatever. That cycle there for drying isn't being done properly. Other than that, though, the new fans are way better than the old fans, especially their format. That's why I'm getting so much better performance with lower RPM. It's because they've gone for fewer fans with a more increased angle. It means that you get higher pressure, fewer fan blades at least with a more increased angle. The other older fans had way more blades, and those are more airflow, so they would struggle to push through the radiator, but this is a much better design. Anyway, that's all I have for you in this review. If you have enjoyed it, please do hit us up with a like and subscribe, and I will see you on the flip side. Very cool intro that I thought long and hard about before I did it. Gamdias, cold as ice, it's willing to sacrifice. My name is Rice, and I've tried this thrice.